My name is Aaron Bockenheimer, and I serve here at UNC as the Executive Director of Off-Campus Student Life and Community Partnerships.
And I'm Alan Blattner. I am the Director of Carolina Housing, looking after all of the on-campus properties.
Yeah. And once again, my name is Haley Boland. I'm the Communications Fellow here at New Student and Family Programs. We appreciate you all bearing with us here on our first edition of Family Fridays.
Technology.
Right, I know. Yeah. So what kind of personal information goes into a housing application?
Well, thankfully, because it's connected to their academic and student record, they don't have to fill a lot of that out. Simply by logging in, it populates a lot of that information for them. So what they would put in there would be any roommate preferences they have. They can select various options, but there's much less information that goes into the upper class application because we're not making any assignment decisions for them. They're making them. So they don't have to tell us about their preferred roommate because they're picking the room. They don't have to tell us about their building preferences because they're doing that live in real time.
And you said that's due online November 26th?
26th is they go ahead and apply, and then they'll be given their date where they log back in to pick their room.
I gotcha. Yeah. And Aaron, we'll move on with you.
Sure.
So can you kind of tell us about the messages that students might receive about off-campus housing once they've come to Carolina?
Yeah, so I think the role that we really try to play is supporting students in their decision-making process. And our goal is to give students good information, as much information as we can give them, so that if and when they make a choice to live off campus, or even before they make the choice to live off campus, that they are doing it in a really well-informed, thoughtful, and intentional way. You know, Alan and I talk a lot. It is not my job to encourage students to live off campus. Students will make their own choices about when is the right time for them to move off campus. We want to make sure that if and when that time comes, that they have the right information, the right resources and the support necessary to make sure that that decision is the right one for them. And it's not maybe being made on some sort of flippant sort of decision, but it's really grounded in a thoughtful and intelligent kind of way. You know, we share a philosophy that students really benefit from living on campus for at least 2 years. We obviously only have a first year live on requirement, but you know, if a student just says, you know, should I live on campus for my second year? I can give them lots of philosophical and educational and actually research-based reasons why living on campus for 2 years is a really good idea. But if they then say, well, there's a lot of other factors that are going into my decision, finances, my need to be able to access an off-campus job, any number of familial factors that may play in. My role, our office's role, is to then help them think through budget, cost, right, location, roommates and housemates, the lease signing process. And we use a number of community resources, including Carolina Legal Services, to help support that decision-making process.
Yeah, so what are some common myths that you hear students come to you with regarding off-campus housing? That's
great. So it's funny, Alan and I do a myth-busting tour a lot of times, and we'll go out and we'll talk to students and families and community members. So great question. So I think, and Alan, please jump in here. You know, I think one of the myths that we hear a lot is, I have to make a decision really early or there won't be anywhere for me to go off campus. So I think there is, not just in Chapel Hill, but nationally, an emerging pressure from the off-campus market to sign early. And if you don't sign early, you're not going to get the greatest, latest kind of place, right? And so one of the things that we try to remind students is it's really better to make a thoughtful, informed decision than to rush into a decision. And you can wait well into the spring semester and still find really viable off-campus options. So it's better to wait. So that's one of the myths that we try to bust, is that you have to make a decision really, really early. I think one of the other myths that we talk a lot to students about, their perception is that it's just cheaper to live off campus. Cost is a complicated factor when it comes to housing. And so one of the things, again, that we spend a lot of time with students doing is to help them understand the true costs of both on-campus and off campus. And so they can make an apples to apples comparison, right? They might see their student bill and see the cost of living on campus, and then see a rental special advertised in the community. They go, oh, look, it's less expensive to live off campus, and not necessarily realize all that's included in terms of the on-campus and all the things that are not included in that off-campus sticker price. And so we really try to help students understand that living off campus may be more affordable for you, but you need a lot more information to inform that decision-making process than simply an assumption that it's going to live off. And then just one more thing I'll say, and there's lots of myths that we work around, but another one that we find frequently is students will say, well, I'm just going to live with my best friend, and that's going to be the best situation for me. And sometimes best friend 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month into their first year at Carolina is just the person they've spent the most time with here, which might end up becoming their best friend. But sometimes your best friend is not your most compatible housemate or roommate. And so we also try to help students sort of think through, what does it mean to live in a compatible rooming situation? You can still have your best friends that you do things with, but are you taking the time with that person to ask questions like, what's your living style? Are you clean? Do you like to do dishes? How are you going to be paying bills? How are we going to negotiate the divvying up of financial responsibilities? Those are really important questions to ask that don't always get addressed when students are just like, hey, I want to live with my buddy. So those are a couple of things we spend time talking about.
I would just add one thing to the cost, and really try and transition the thought of cost to the concept of value. Because if flexibility, for example, is a value, you're going to get a 12-month lease off campus. If you're graduating in May and you have signed that lease in August, you have 3 months where you may have the need to move to New York City to start your new job and rent a new property there, and you're left with either the payment or the finding a subleaser or those kinds of things to deal with your market here. On campus, as soon as you graduate, you're done, and you can move on without having to think about those. Students who are studying abroad are thinking of an off-campus opportunity that would take them away from Chapel Hill. Off campus, they'll have to look at the terms of their lease agreement for what their options are, but on campus, easy process to cancel their agreement with us, to go ahead and go do that experience, and then when they're ready to re-engage the housing process, to come back in. And so and that's just one example of flexibility that is very often tips towards on campus being a better option, but it really is just one of those points in terms of the value of the experience and what it is that they need for their personal situation.
So we do have a few questions, but one final question for you, Aaron, is what kind of resources do you offer to support families who are, or students who are trying to move off campus?
Students and families. So a couple of resources. One is we have 2 websites that we're really proud of. One I kind of call our education site. So it's offcampus.unc.edu, and it really just talks through a lot of the things that you and I have already talked about, and that is helping students with information related to costs, housemates, roommates, leases, getting to and from campus, transportation, parking, just general information about what it means to live off campus and in the community in Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and the greater sort of surrounding area. Our other site is our housing listing service at offcampushousing.unc.edu, and that's a service that we launched last January. It's a place where students and family members can go and look at off-campus properties that have partnered with the university. You can do all kinds of great research, look at costs, look at floor plans, look at is it on the bus line or not on the bus line. It also has a roommate finder, so it's UNC authenticated, so you have to have an onion and a password to get in, so you know anybody you find in that profile site is going to be another UNC student, faculty, or staff member. So many of our students who are either transferring or graduate students really like it. If they don't know a lot of people who are coming to the community, they can find roommates and housemates there. Messaging boards, other resources. It's a great comparison site. The other thing that we then can do is we can be a consultant for a student or students, right? So I have groups of roommates who will come and say, we're thinking about living off campus. We don't even know where to start. And so I can sit down with them, open up the website, kind of show them some options. We can talk through, and I'll usually ask them a lot of questions up front. What are you looking for? What are your needs? What are your wants? And by the way, those are two different things, right? What are some places that are going to help address those needs and wants? I kind of send them off to do some homework and then come back and help them maybe narrow down some choices. I don't tend to go thumbs up, thumbs down, you should live here or don't live there. I try to help them think through the questions that they maybe haven't thought of, and then help them really decide what's going to be the place or places that are going to best meet our needs as students. And again, whether that's on campus or off campus.
Yeah.
And I guess I would just add, because I think a lot of people don't think to come to the on-campus housing office for a kind of a well-rounded conversation around housing, but we would offer the same advice. Right. We have access to the same website because
on-campus properties are actually on our off-campus housing website.
You know, again, just to have everybody consider their full range of options. And you know, bottom line, it's not any good for us on-campus housing if someone who is a mismatch with their needs to stay on campus with us. You know, we've got plenty of students who want to live on campus with us. We're much more aligned with Aaron and his staff in terms of just making sure they're making a good decision. So they should feel free, because they have really easy access to their community directors, their RAs, or our office to explore those same questions with us.
Yeah, and before we move into some viewer questions, if you guys both could provide some brief key takeaways, as well as repeat the names of your websites and resources that students can access online.
Sure. Website, www.housing.unc.edu, or just go to the main main page and search housing, and we come up first. And so I guess the key takeaways were, as Aaron mentioned before, there shouldn't be a sense of pressure of when to sign a lease. I would turn that equation around and have it be, when am I ready to sign a lease? When do I know enough about next year's circumstances to know what flexibility is important, who I want to live with, where I want to live, am I going to have a car and I need parking, do I want to cook for myself?
What's my budget? What are the costs?
What's my budget? All of that. Once that's known, that's when you should begin to explore where. Where is the last piece of that? There's many more decisions to make before that. And I guess the other piece would be just that we are always taking on-campus applications. So this is not just true in terms of the pace of people thinking they need to sign an agreement now. For off-campus, same thing on campus. We'll welcome them and their application whenever they're ready to submit that. They just have different opportunities depending on when they engage our office in terms of what will be available to them and how quickly they will make the choice for themselves.
And so again, for off-campus, we have two websites, offcampus.unc.edu and offcampushousing.unc.edu. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at UNC Off Campus. So check those out. And I think Alan has really covered the points. The thing I really try to stress to students is ask questions, right? Ask questions, do your homework, do the research so that you ultimately end up in the place that's going to be the best fit for you and the best place to support your academic experience, your social experience. That's our goal, right? And so our job is educators to help students make better decisions, more informed decisions, to help support family members' engagement in that process. We are big believers in that whoever is involved in the decision-making process should be involved in the research process as well. And then everybody should come together and figure out what the best place is. And ultimately, we have great resources to help students for that. We want students to know they don't have to guess at this stuff. They can come to us. We can help connect them. We want them to go to Student Legal Services and bring their leases over there, have somebody review it. There's a lot of resources here to help support students in this process.
For sure. So we're going to move into some
Great.
viewer
Great.
questions. If you're watching us now, feel free to submit your questions that you have in the comments below. So our first one is, I guess, more directed towards you, Alan.
Sure.
What benefits are there for students to live on campus and to continue to live on campus?
That's a great question. You know, we have, and we market to our new students our FYE program, our first year experience. We have a corollary to that for our upper class students, our Discover More. And it is really the next phase of all of those same programmatic and educational opportunities that existed in the first year, obviously scaled and projected on the upper class student. And so by engaging in those programs, they'll continue to have RAs and community members engaged in discussions about intended major, about what to do with a major. Many of our upper class students engage in internships, and so we will help them connect with the resources on campus to do that. You know, if they continue to need information about where to go for writing tutors and those kinds of things, we may be bringing those resources right into the buildings to run some workshops, or we'll be happy to help connect them in ways that are different. I think the bottom line answer to that question is a fundamental difference between the on-campus market and the off-campus. Off-campus, you have a landlord-tenant relationship. We are a part of the educational arm of the university. And so it's a different approach. And because of that, different resources are prioritized. Our staff are there to serve students, to help them walk across the stage Mother's Day 4 years from the day they move in. That's our goal, just like it's the university's goal. And so we'll bring to bear whatever resources are helpful to that student.
Awesome. And this question is more for you, Aaron, but how can my students find roommates to live off campus with them?
Yeah, so I would say students find roommates in a number of different ways, right? So some students find, excuse me, off-campus roommates through their on-campus housing experience, whether it's students they get matched with, or students who are in their suite, or students who live on their hall. So a lot of students meet future off-campus roommates through their on-campus housing experience. A lot of students meet their future roommates through involvement opportunities, so clubs and organizations, teams, fraternities and sororities. And then for students who may be new to the community or perhaps are looking for a new roommate situation or housemate, again, our website, offcampushousing.unc.edu, has a roommate finder process. And so you can go in, you can create a profile, you can talk about your preferences, your likes, dislikes, things you're looking for in a housemate or roommate, and then search for other Carolina students that have similar profiles and interests. And by the way, housing uses a similar approach.
Absolutely.
For students who are, we sort of use the word, I don't know if this is official terminology, they're sort of potlucking
That's right.
their roommates, right? So housing uses a similar process. If a student wants to stay on campus and doesn't have a strong preference for a housemate, a roommate on campus, they can sort of potluck, but they'll provide some information that then can be matched. So we don't match students on our website, but we create an opportunity for students to establish what I might call akin to like a social profile, and then students can kind of find each other. So those are two ways that I would say tend to work well in terms of finding roommates and housemates. And then the other thing the last thing I'd add is, again, both off campus and on campus, we provide resources for roommate agreements, which isn't exactly what you're asking, but once students think they have found each other, we really think it's important to establish a roommate agreement to make sure that students are on the same page about expectations. I always joke, the wrong time to find out that your roommate doesn't like doing dishes is like 3 weeks into the semester when the dishes have piled up 2 feet high in the sink. Because then there's all this like passive aggressive, like, are they going to do the dishes or are they not going to do the dishes? Well, I'm not going to clean them until they, it's better to do a roommate agreement, have those conversations up front. And that's what I was talking about before in terms of that compatibility piece.
And then hopefully that's a skill that all of our students have, because roommate agreements are all but required, especially as part of the first year experience. And we carry that through to all of our housing options, because it is so important to have that discussion before there's a misstep. Much easier to talk about expectations and hopes and dreams early on before you're embroiled in some kind of a situation. And we have a very high satisfaction rate on campus with our roommate preferences, and I think it is not because we make good matches, but because of the process we're talking about here, that we force a conversation that isn't always top of mind for everybody, to think about the kinds of conversations they should be having with their roommates. But I can't tell you the number of disagreements we've helped students work through over, can I borrow the sweater that's in the closet? It's never the big things, it's the little things. And if you talk about those things and come to some kind of an agreement, you sail from there. And you get busy doing what you came here to do as a student, which is to engage in class, engage with classmates, and have a Carolina experience.
Great. And it's better to not have to learn those the hard way.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. So one of our next questions is more directed towards on-campus housing with what are some new features in some of the older buildings that we have on campus?
Absolutely. So yeah, we're always working with students to help identify kind of what's next. And so we have spent a lot of time and energy. We've replaced every desk chair on campus this year. By the time students move back next fall, we will have replaced every bed on campus because some of our older beds were not meeting student needs, let's say. We've improved the lounges. We're in the process right now of converting and renovating all of our on-campus kitchens, both the ones in the apartments and the ones that are in the common areas. And so we're trying to make smart reinvestments of student rent dollars. Because one of the things that may not be known is that we don't get any state money, any tuition money, any allocation other than what we collect from student rent. And so we have to work with our students to spend their money wisely on what would be a good reinvestment. So those are some of the examples, along with the programmatic initiatives and the staff that I talked about that make such a difference in the lives of students. Big difference between on and off campus is the presence of the RAs and the community directors and that kind of care that they bring to the equation in terms of students who are struggling or students who want someone to celebrate success with. They're there for both of those things.
Alan, you should mention just briefly the two new maker spaces. I think those are really cool.
Sure.
Examples of things that are happening on campus.
Yeah, and this is another thing that we really try and do is partner with really the amazing things that are happening across Carolina. Two of those are, we opened last year a makerspace in conjunction with the Beam group on campus, which is the Be a Maker group, and Keenan-Felliger Business School. We opened up a makerspace over in Carmichael Hall, 36 3D printers, a brand new state-of-the-art kitchen, a teaching and learning laboratory there so that students can come together with faculty and others and incubate ideas and just be part of the amazing kind of entrepreneurial spirit and process and innovation that happens here at Carolina. The other is in partnership with Arts Everywhere to try and make art and art making more accessible on campus. So we just opened a painting studio in Morrison Hall, staffed by a painting studio specialist who is there to give open instruction hours. You can go in, we've got brushes, we've got paints, we've got canvases, whether you're ready to paint the next Mona Lisa, or like me, barely. I'm better than stick figures.
Okay. Speak for myself.
Hey now.
Not much, but regardless of the talent you bring to the equation, the opportunity to express is there and fostered by the on-campus experience.
For sure. So this next question is, Alan, if you could repeat what that date is for the on-campus housing application to be due, as well as if my student is already planning on living off campus, does she need to notify the housing office?
Let me answer that one first. Okay. No, it's a one-year contract. It automatically ends in May, and so there's no reason to contact us to say I've made other arrangements for next year. All of our students will have received one of these with all the information that they need. It is November 26th at midnight is when the application closes. And let me reiterate that that is for the upcoming lottery process, to try and not put pressure on them to have to decide. If they're not ready, they should just forego this opportunity. There will always be an opportunity to get back online and fill out the application. But if they want to participate in this first round of housing selection, November 26th at midnight. There's also a mailing that is coming home just in time for Thanksgiving holiday visits of students and their families to go ahead and visit. And that material will have many of the tips we've talked about here, as well as other opportunities. So they should look forward to that.
We have time for about one more question. So this says, on-campus housing has helped me with accessible housing needs. Is it helpful to these same students? Is there something offered by off-campus housing as well?
Yeah, so most commercial off-campus housing properties have requirements to be compliant with ADA. So most apartment complexes that are commercial in nature do have accessible apartments and will be required to have some number and some amount of accessible apartments. And so one of the nice features on our off-campus housing website is in the filtering, you can check a box and only get back results of complexes that offer accessible units. We can also be a resource if folks want to give us a call and talk to us about some options. I would say houses, so single family houses, a family that's looking to rent a room out, those kinds of situations are not going to be required, right, under those ADA requirements. And so it's really important that you do your homework. I would say this for anybody, in fact, that you see a place before you sign a lease. You need to see where you're going. So again, there's a big difference between a commercial apartment complex that is required to meet fair housing laws and ADA and somebody who invested in a property off campus and just happens to be renting a house or a room out in that house that would not have those same accessibility requirements. So it's important to do homework. It's important to see the space before you move in. And again, let us know if you have questions and more information. But I think our filtering feature on the website is a nice way to at least get a sense of, what's out there in terms of floor plans and accessibility.
Absolutely. Well, that's about all the time that we
Great.
have for
Great.
this day, but I
Bye.
think we provided some really good information. We weren't able to get to all of the questions, but if we did not answer your question, we will be addressing that through our Facebook page as well. If you need any other further information, feel free to contact either of these two folks here,
Absolutely.
also through their websites that they mentioned earlier. But thank you to you all for your
Absolutely.
Thank you.
time.
For hosting.
Yeah.
And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in to our first Family Fridays. Stay tuned for more communication about what our next webcast will be about.